He needs no introduction. For some, he might need an introduction, so here we go. Philip is fairly well regarded around the world, actually, as a futurist with particular emphasis on technology, but looking at how technology impacts behaviours and the use of the built environment. So he's going to talk today about the thin building. If it can be the thin me and the thin building, that would be very much appreciated. But let's see what you have to tell us about how the dynamics of technology are changing how we use the physical environment and what's out there. And you're probably going to frighten us a little bit again, aren't you? Maybe just a bit. Okay, Philip, over to you.
Thank you, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here. My challenge is to kind of explain the idea of a thin building for you. And really what we're looking at is the idea that buildings can reduce in their scale and their size going forwards. I need to change flickers over here. Is that So the idea of a thin building owes its origins to thin technology, thin client technology. And that's what we're heading towards going forwards. There we go. And I want you to stop and think. And the idea of the cloud is something I want to kind of come back to, because we're heading to a different era. And I asked a few wise sages on my travels over here what thin meant to them. And of course, the Americans all say, well, it's got to be the Flatiron Building, this kind of wonderful thing in New York. There's some great thin buildings where I come from. A couple of wags talked about, obviously, thin technology, the dream of Steve Jobs of technology with no screws. And then back to Jerry's cream, some of the older generation, not the boomers and millennials, reminisced. There's too fat, there's too thin, but I think the other one, of course, was the idea of the thinning hair of maybe the baby boomers in the audience. But seriously, we're heading to the clouds, and I think it's the cloud that will shape the idea of a thin building, and you have to all begin to decide what kind of cloud you want to get on, what cloud is yours. And there are lots of choices. Are you a cumulonimbus? Will you kind of pick something else? But the cloud will change how we work, how we collaborate. It will reshape connectivity, which I'll come back to as the big next thing for workplace, real-time real estate. It will shrink workplaces, and I think it will have a fundamental impact on what we think about the future of work. So what is the cloud? Well, it's about the kind of collision between those three realms of people, place, technology, and they're colliding. But the interesting areas on those diagrams are the overlaps that I'm sure you're familiar with, because where technology overlaps with the physical building is the real win going forwards. Just one or two quick slides about us. We formed the company 17 years ago. We've been lucky enough to predict the emergence of technology over those 17 years and worked with some fascinating companies. And I've written a number of books with Jeremy Myerson on the future of work and the workplace, and we're on our fourth in this series at the moment. So we're looking globally and finding some fascinating examples. And what the economists said, I think, is right. They are seeing computers now vanishing, becoming accessible from anywhere in their recent survey. Now, you're all familiar with data centers. I don't have to tell you about what Google have done and Apple have done with their billions of dollars invested in data centers. But what's exciting in America is something very different. What is powering the iPad is a virtualized data center. It no longer has to be a huge engineered factory. It's on-demand real estate. The servers are now brought in containers on the backs of lorries and stacked into an otherwise fairly dumb building. It takes 24 hours to plug a container in for power, the water for cooling, and to go live with a new added data center. So rather than fitting out, we're seeing this idea of complete virtualization. And that's a term you'll begin to be familiar with. Jason said you have to come to the office because you need resources. I'd argue with that. I think the future, the office will be empty of most technology, and it will all be virtualized. You'll use it on demand. So software will no longer be something that your IT department installs on your computer or your laptop. It will be a service, a utility that you just consume when you want it on demand. And Adobe are now moving to let you use their software by the minute. What you deliver then to a device, I think, looks very different. If the data's gone and the software is now going, delivering back to a device will be virtualized experiences. You won't shift files anymore, you'll just send the changes down a pipe. So the office in the future really is no more than a pipe to the cloud. That's where we think we're heading. And when you look at the pipe, it will be synchronized over any device you choose to use, whether you go to a thin client or you take a new smartphone. And I think where Windows is going this year with Windows 8 is exactly what should be happening. It doesn't matter what you pick up, the experience is the same. So a Windows smartphone will look identical to a new Windows 8 desktop. And with Windows 8, which is coming out later this year, you have these real-time tiles, blocks which are changing live in front of you. And I think the other important trend is gone are the days of separate programs for different tasks that you perform at work. You'll stop thinking, I'm word processing or I'm using spreadsheets. It will all be blurred and merge into one. And that's a big change. It changes how we think about activities. I think what's most exciting with what we're seeing in the labs here from Motorola is that the actual laptop might be challenged going forwards. These are new devices, for example, the Droid here. What you're doing here is you're docking your smartphone into what is a dumb laptop. If you can see on this image, you've got here on the back of the laptop your smartphone docked here, or just there. So you come along, dock your phone, and you use a keyboard, screen, mouse, but your phone is the conduit to the cloud. You don't have a separate laptop with hard drives and processors and connectivity. And that's a very interesting vision. In the future, you might just dock your phone onto a piece of furniture, and that will connect into the cloud. And the fascinating thing is that Intel have just announced this wonderful technology called WiDi, which you'll see this year coming out. It stands for wireless display. It's built into Intel chips. And the top image is the first ever WiDi screen coming from Samsung, which will launch in about October, which means that you just have a device with Intel WiDi and you just throw your images wirelessly onto screens. No more cables of any kind. And you heard from Neil some new stuff. Well, here's wireless power, which I'll come back and show you a video of this working. This is the first ever desk in the world with inductive power built into it. You drop your devices on the table and they trickle charge. So the world is becoming very thin. We'll be carrying our own device. BYO, bring your own, we think will be the mantra. You'll no longer be issued with a piece of corporate technology, but you'll just have a budget per annum and buy whatever you suit in terms of your own personal preferences. And we're hearing banks, we're hearing Deutsche Bank saying to graduates, you can bring your iBook to work. We'll pay for your iBook or your Mac Air. So what's happening is that as you get to this vision of kind of portability in the cloud, you can begin to work anywhere, as you've heard. We'll look at third spaces, you can look at work on the pause and life on the pause, but it's not without its challenges. And I don't think yet, and we'll hear from the hub in a minute, we've really solved the issue of working on the pause. It's a real issue. I mean, Jason showed that lovely image of the two benches connected. I mean, trying to video conference on the pause is becoming a problem. And I'll come back to why it becomes even more interesting in open plan. So the thin building, the cloud, says goodbye to all this. Yeah, we've housed these in our offices for 30 or 40 years with the power, the cooling, the fire suppression, the voids, the cabling, linked to tin boxes around the building, all the pressures of space, you know, watching this kind of systemized, engineered structure grow up around the networked computer. And not much changed, you know, as the computer replaced the typewriter and so on. And we still kind of then feel we're chained down to a piece of furniture. So we think the cloud will change all that. We think that it'll move away from this idea of hemorrhaging people into space with endless amounts of paper, the shortage of kind of space between the two human beings, because it's all about fixed technology, and this kind of obsession that the desk is the place to go and work, because that's where your phone is and that's where your computer is. Now, I'm not suggesting that we're going to end up working anywhere, so I think there must be some limits, but we see an evolution away from this idea of the fixed computer in an era where nothing is housed on that computer or at the desk in the future. Now, Jason mentioned that, you know, when you come in you need resources, and our view is what you really need is a blistering pipe inside buildings, and that pipe by and large will be wireless. You know, the iPad has no Ethernet port. You do need to have a new view of wireless. And these are the leaders in the States. This is a company called Maru Network. It's a complete revolution in wireless inside buildings. It allows what's called a single cell, single channel infrastructure, which gives you hundreds of megabits per second per person inside the office. It lets you use the cloud properly. And you combine this with other things you might begin to hear about, like Riverbed, Talari, and so on. Now, there are some issues. You know, wireless is not for everyone, and we still hear people think, you know, well, hang on a minute, can it really be safe? Can it be secure? But we can see it really changing the nature of how you access the cloud going forwards. So really what you want when you come into the building is just a huge display. It's a big window to the world. If you have this vision that you'll dock your phone, like in Motorola's view, what you want are screens, 2, 3, large, curved, whatever they might be in the future. We see that being the way forwards, because you just want a big picture to the cloud with the most amazing experience. That's why you're in the office, partly. And we realized that we think paper, or the half-life of paper, is diminishing, because really what you see on screen today, you can't just hit the print button and read offline. You know, screens now have layers, they have hover buttons, they have links. So it's no longer two-dimensional. So we see some of this as beginning to kill paper, because you have to co-collaborate or co-author documents. The biggest problem that we think coming is the massive increase in video conferencing with webcams. So FaceTime on the iPad, webcams, as Jason mentioned, Skype is going to explode. Cisco now says that 90% of its network traffic is video. And there's a big issue, we think, with video, because of course it sees what's behind you, not just the person in front of the camera.
Hi, babe.
No. The Sony Vaio notebook.
Yeah, tongue in cheek, but there's a serious point there. When you're videoing an open plan, the person can do a screen capture, blow it up and see what's on a whiteboard across the office. And that's becoming a real issue with our clients. They're saying people are now using the webcam in open plan or even in private offices, and what's on flip charts and whiteboards behind them unconsciously is being captured by people. So here is a real interesting idea from Eversheds, the law firm in London, where with the webcams on this screen here, you can tilt the screen and pull a backdrop around you. So this furniture here actually can be pulled out and extended to create a kind of a temporary backdrop. The old photo booths where you can pull a curtain. So we see a lot of thinking coming through. We're also well aware of social networks. And there's a real interesting polar extreme. We heard about Jason's view about collaboration types. Well, you see, Shell have done a study, and they have a lot of people around the world. And Shell have found that of their 50,000 wiki users, when they are collaborating, the best answers are coming from people who are not in the room. So Andy Boyd, who's head of global knowledge management for Shell, has tested this in their 100,000 global community, and he's proven that the best people to kind of collaborate and add value to a discussion are not in the space, they are in the global community. So he's predicting more virtual work, whereas Stephen Johnson in this great new book says the opposite. He's tracked innovation for 200 years, and he says actually to innovate you need energy. You need what he calls the adjacent possible. You need people to be together in the same space. So there's a debate there. Maybe we can discuss this, whether the view of virtual is right, or whether it's back to Stephen's view, it's actually all about human beings in the same space in a hive of energy. But those hives are not great today, are they? It's a bit cleaner than your picture of kind of but that's what I see when I walk into, if you want 10 people collaborating, it's an absolute mess. But as you saw from Jason, there's a huge amount coming that will change that. Wonderful spaces for collaboration. And when you look at the technology that will now accommodate our walls, it is quite astonishing. What was in Minority Report a few years ago really is now commonplace in the IT labs. So this is in Helsinki, an amazing Finnish company, just put the stuff into Siemens. You can now create entire walls of touch screen where multiple people can manipulate images, drag things across, open, close, and play with them. And this is now cheap technology. This is no longer specialized equipment. And then you get Microsoft in their envisioning labs in Redmond, really playing with what a future collaboration space looks like. No longer table and chairs, but a place of rich knowledge and information. So we see this moving quite quickly. And I think what's more exciting is that real-time real estate will be around the Internet of Things. And I won't go into too much detail on the technology, but basically the growth of the Internet will be all about inanimate objects connecting and talking. So real-time real estate is huge. And the early pioneers are people like Royal Bank of Scotland. And they basically began to use active radio tags to track people inside a building. Now, you might think Big Brother, we heard from Charles earlier about unions and laws and so on. This is a major global bank, and all those blue dots are people in real time, the worker bees, and you can see them moving around the building, saying who's who and where they are and what they're doing. And they all volunteered to do this, by the way, with phenomenal results, which we can again discuss. So you begin to get load-balanced buildings. You can see a building and they're heat mapped in real time. What's used, what's open, meeting room occupancy levels. You can have an EPOS-type view, a dashboard of your entire portfolio, and see its efficiency levels globally in real time. And that we're hearing from our real estate directors is what they want to report into the FD. But it gets more exciting than the dashboards. This is from Microsoft Labs. Now, I shouldn't really show you this, but bear with me. This is Connect for business. It's nowhere near launching. But what you're seeing here is a Connect camera that your kids are using on an Xbox 360, used on a computer to model a three-dimensional space. So we're now showing the Connect camera an office. And the camera is modeling in 3 dimensions every object, every surface in that office. And it can then put people into the space. So the camera is then turned onto me and a few others who are being shown this incredible technology, and we are modeled and put into the space. And our view is that Connect technology will come into all workplaces as it has in gaming, and again revolutionize how they're used. So you can see here that the camera is modeled every aspect. On the top middle is the real space, and the bottom are the 2 models with the Connect camera judging all the distances and surfaces. And the camera then turns and actually puts people in real time into the space. So it takes a shot of the people and creates this 3-dimensional perfect image of people in the space. He then went on to show how you can then turn any object or any surface and make it do anything you want, which is quite an astonishing concept. So now the fingers are touching and identifying an action from touch. It could be an object, it could be a color, and we'll see in a minute, we've transformed the wall into an interactive board with the fingers there, and we can then touch them, tell the Connect camera that we want to make it interactive, and then start drawing on a wall. You could touch a vase and make it have a mouse click. So here we are drawing live on a virtual wall using a Connect camera. Now this is labs. This is well away from commercial reality, but you can get a feeling for what's going on. And this gets more exciting. This is wireless power. If you watch the bottom left, that phone has just been placed on a surface, and the light goes on, and it starts recharging. And it's then moved over to an NFC, near-field communications link, to trigger some kind of action. If you watch the next shot, this is a KitchenAid blender. It's working, as you can see. Watch out, there is no power cable. So that's a blender. This is 1,000 watts wireless power, inductive, through a surface. And that's in the labs of Fulton Technologies. And it moves back onto the surface, and you can see there it'll start blending again. So this is induction through any surface, but not just trickle charging now. This is powering lights, blenders, and if you wait for this next image, it can boil a pan of water as well. The saucepan is put over, you can see the handle, the light's lighting up, it then starts flashing. It boiled water from scratch in about 20 seconds. But the clever thing is the pan then sends a message to your mobile phone saying the water's boiling. And this is a new global specification called Qi. And lots of companies will be making products to the Qi specification now. So you can see remarkable change in furniture, in surfaces. And we're doing our first project with this actually for a specialist dementia project, where of course these are non-heated surfaces. So there's no issue in touch of a kitchen type cooking surface. It gets more exciting still. Here's a Harry Potter magazine. Pop it onto an inductive shelf and see what happens. So wireless power is not about powering powered objects. It can make packaging start flashing because it can power printer's ink. This is ink that's being wirelessly powered to kind of react. So where could this go? Absolutely fascinating technology coming through based on magnetic induction. And this changes the kind of idea of the smart home. You know, you're here seeing white goods. If you look at the white goods from Toshiba behind you, they will send to your iPhone or something similar details as to your washing when it finishes. You can control everything from that. And therefore, we're seeing this very exciting, I think, move towards where a real-time building really is real-time real estate. Everything is connected. You can control it, you can analyze it, and you can begin to do very new things. So I think back to Jason's comment, you know, why have I come to the office? What's the office for? It's not just about people coming together, we think, in the future to collaborate. The next big leap will be on intelligence in the building and remarkable set of circumstances and technologies allowing a very different interaction. So thin buildings, we think, are coming very quickly. And when we look at the idea of a thin building, to me it's about finishing this endless debate about open plan and cellular, but a different view of the future, which we call hybrid work. And the hybrid office, we think, will come. We've done this work with Microsoft. So we've done a big piece of work called the Hybrid Organization. It's on the Microsoft website if you Google it. And it's a piece of analysis globally with them, talking about where we think hybrid cities and hybrid organizations and hybrid workplaces will go. And to kind of use an analogy of art, it's the kind of end of Mondrian, basically. To me, that looks like any classic space plan, you know, the blocks of space we allocate to companies and departments in their buildings. And the thin building is about Kandinsky. It's a move to the internet. And that's much more about where we're heading. It's not as easy to space plan. It's not as ordered and as kind of efficient from a space planning perspective, but certainly we think buildings are about this, coming in, connecting, reconfiguring, real-time real estate will be morphing to this very quickly. So the future of work, we think, is kind of multiple and complex. I want to show you just a few of the most exciting workplaces that I'm seeing globally around this. One lovely place that I still keep going back to is the BMW plant designed by Zaha Hadid in Leipzig. Perhaps the best narrative workplace in the world for those that have been there, because she's diverted the production line to go through the office. So these office workers are working away on their designs, and these half-made cars pass silently above their heads, bathed in blue light. But globally, still one of my favorites is Interpolis in southern Holland, in a place called Tilburg. Started in 1995, still a radical workspace with 3,500 people that stood the test of time. And they are becoming thinner and thinner over that evolution. Now everyone carrying their own wireless technology. Remarkable spaces, lounges, stone huts from Glasgow, furniture that's eclectic, people working in really exciting spaces that have this kind of aspirational feel to them. They've punched through the slab. I mean, we're seeing much more verticality, certainly in Australia, but globally, this is a very, very apparent phenomena. And what we're finding is that you can actually use height and movement as part of this kind of approach for people and behaviors going forwards. Now, the owners of Interpolis, Rabobank, which is a major European bank, have just opened in the last few weeks their new headquarters in Utrecht. And this is for 5,000 people. And in those 15 years, they've learned from the experience of Interpolis. They've called this now Rabo Unplugged, because it really is about letting go and changing the nature of how work is done towards this idea of thin. As you come into the space, the actual plaza is huge and fabulous, endless places in a kind of semi-public environment to go and work with these incredible bird's nest structures for meetings. That was the espresso bar at the heart of the plaza. And it goes on and on and on with working environments, lounge tables, meeting spaces, coffee areas, more traditional meeting rooms. They've co-created this space. So here, for example, is a cardboard designed meeting room made totally out of cardboard by Ellen Sander. And some really exciting spaces that people kind of want to go to. It's kind of very aspirational. And the main tower above that plaza is split into 4 main houses. So people go to a house, very Dutch, each day, and the house is kind of 4 floors, and each house has its own kind of mini atrium. We're also impressed with what Google's doing with their workplaces. I'm sure many of you have been to Mountain View, where the idea that Googlers can have 20% time where they go off from their workplace to have inspiration and ideas and innovation is always, I think, a very interesting behavioral change, where it's a combination of eclectic workspace, coffee, napping, whatever you might do, but it's not your kind of typical desk-based work. And they're now evolving this globally, but people like Zurich and Copenhagen are most exciting, where we think, the actual working spaces are not that unusual. It's this classic investment in the eclectic, having a slide into the restaurant, which is actually very fast when you go on it. You kind of whiz down this thing straight into the restaurant, or jump down a fireman's pole. The only company in the world I've seen using fireman's poles effectively. Or refurbishing ski lifts to make an inviting place to go and chat and meet. What we found in Google was an eclectic approach to design, a place that's actually much more conducive. And that's the trend I'm now seeing, that the design is now placed above space planning. And Microsoft perhaps is the most interesting example, this one in Schiphol, but Helsinki just opened as equally inspirational, where people now really are working in a thin building. In this building, there's almost nothing. The servers are in Germany. There is no phone system at all, no PBX and no phone system to speak of. There's almost no printers and photocopiers, and there's no fixed equipment on the desk. So everyone now carries a wireless laptop and a smartphone, and that's it. The only other technology around the building is round table, the Polycom kind of conferencing units. But you can see when you walk up to a bench, they're not cluttered, they're not full of kit or screens or files, they're just empty surfaces for work. And they're punctuated by all sorts of clever spaces for stand-up working, for collaboration, 1 person, 2 person, you name it. They punch through the atrium to produce this wonderful staircase. The original fit-out budget was €3 million. They spent €13 million, and it had to be ratified by Steve Ballmer because Theo, the GM, the general manager, had a passion for work and the business benefits that he could achieve through the design and the change in the way they worked. And he has done. He saved 30% of his real estate costs in doing this, and his sales increased by 51%. The figure he likes to tell me now, though, that since it's opened, 36,000 people have been to see his workplace from all over the globe. That's a software sales business, and 36,000 customers are banging on his door saying, "Can I come and talk to you?" So for them, it's been an astonishing success. So thin workplaces, I think, will be very transformational. And the next evolution for you is we're going to collide social networking with real estate to really kind of tell you who's in and who you should talk to and not leave it to chance. And therefore, the real-time building will not just load balance, but it will engineer encounters. And that's where most companies see massive advantage. So thin really, we think, is substantial. It's about massive cost saving. It's about lower power, it's about lower IT costs, it's about not housing the technology at all in the future. But it's not just about collaboration, it's about a very different model going forwards. And in the WORK report that I think is in your bags, we've analysed this idea of monetizing agility and a vision that actually the future of the workplace will be just variable cost. We see the idea of a budget for the workplace, so workplace as a service going forwards. And there's a kind of an equation that we've developed to go with it, the agility dividend, where you can begin to really put a bottom line figure on the idea of agility. So Thin's not without its challenges. There's lots of questions, lots of things need answer. There's lots of knowledge and research. If you want to kind of download some free stuff, go to our website, UNWORK.com, and there's lots of free materials and research up there for you. Back to our poor guy with the thinning hair. Not much can help him, actually. We haven't yet found the solution, but there is one coming. In the labs in MIT, we were shown the very first ever concept hair robots, affectionately named hairbots by their inventor. And these little fellows will colonize your head in the future and apparently at all times keep your hair looking immaculate. So I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.